So welcome to this little seminar. I have to say that this is the first time I'm running something like this. I've had several one-on-one meetings with artists and young producers who have questions or are interested in knowing more about starting a theater company. It's been a journey, and it's been really interesting. And I think at the end of it, I'm going to send everybody an email to see if you can give me a little bit of feedback on this. All right, so as we begin, what I want to say is that it's important to understand the context in which I'm going to be sharing stuff. It is based on, and it is from, and in my experience. And so it's a guide that I've put together, but it is also just a guide that's based on the journey that I've been on. And I want to preface with that because I think it's important that you know that there might be things I might say that you might be like, you know what, that's totally like BS. So I'm going to do it a completely different way. And that's totally cool. This is just the things that I've kept in mind, or the things that I've learned as I've been through this journey of starting a theater company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess it would help if you don't really know me to know a little bit about me. So it's just a little quick bio that I've just put together. I was born in Tirana, Albania, which is often confused with Armenia, though it's not Armenia. Albania is a little tiny, beautiful country in the Eastern Bloc. I was trained as a dancer, mainly in ballet, jazz, and Albanian folk dancing. And when I was 15, my family moved to Toronto, or otherwise known as Degarunto. It took me a long time to understand my relationship with the land and my position as a settler, and also further to have a better understanding of how I can be honoring the nations, the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee people, and all of the other recorded and unrecorded nations, and how I can be a better member of this community, how I can help take care of the waterways and the land. So I just wanted to acknowledge them as we begin. Soon after I moved to Toronto, I started falling in love with theater, and I kind of divorced myself from dance, which led me to the National Theatre School of Canada in Montreal, where I started as an actor. And then from there on, I became fascinated with producing and sort of making theater, which is what led me to creating Lemon Tree Creations, which is a small, well, not so small, but maybe an independent theater company that focuses on queer work in Toronto. You can check us out at lemontreecreations.ca. But I simultaneously also worked as a performer for Corpus Dance. And with them, I toured to North America and Asia and Europe. And I started learning a bit more about what it meant to create work that was tourable and understand the network of presenters, et cetera. I also did some offshoot producing with kind of strange theater companies or in this case, opera companies. I worked with Opera Erotica, and we did a really exciting brand new opera inside a shed, and we charged people a lot of money to see this opera, and it did really well. It sold out. I then started doing an internship at Cahoots Theater, where I worked as an artistic producer there, as an associate artistic producer for a few years, about 4 years. I started as an intern, and then I got hired by the company. I also produced sort of on an indie level with Saga Collective. They produced a show called Black Boys, which was a huge hit at Buddies in Bad Times, and then it toured, but also on the larger scale with Asa Productions at Luminato Festival just last year. And all of this has sort of led me to my current position at Theatre Passe Muraille as the Associate Artistic Director. I think of my work really as a discourse. I want my work to be a conversation, a challenging conversation, and I see my work as pushing against white supremacy, pushing against capitalist ideals, pushing against misogyny, pushing very much against heteronormativity. And I really think of myself as like very anti-establishment, which is kind of ironic that we're kind of gathered today to talk about establishing an establishment, but I'll get back to that at the end of the seminar. And here's a couple of just kind of like fun awards that I got. So that's it about me. So before we begin, I wanted to also start by saying that anything that you kind of set your mind to is possible. I really believe in the fact that there's nothing that's impossible, and you have to kind of move with that way of thinking as you start creating and envisioning a theater company, but also like a project or an entity, something that you want to put your mind to it. So I really kind of like what Good Fucking Design Advice does. Their handle is Good DSGN Advice on Instagram if you want to check them out. They have really cool, interesting design as well as really, really exciting advice. And so I just want to start with this sort of feel of like, you can fucking do it at any time. I'm going to break this down into 4 different categories. We're going to start with the why, then we're going to move into the who, then we're going to move into the what, which is really kind of like, as you can see, it's a bit of a cycle, and we're going to finish with the how. And you'll see that it's a circular motion, and all of these different places feed into each other. So if we begin with the why, it's important, I think, to really spend some time and think about the reason why you want to create this company or this entity. And so I really wanted to spend some time to share a little bit of what I wish I had at the time. And so as we think about the why, it's really the reason why you want to do what you want to do. And one second. Two things that I really want for you to keep in mind is, how is your why in relationship with the community you want to serve? And the second thing is, how is your why personal and specific? And I'm going to explain a little bit more what I mean by this. And I can only do this if we go through like an example of like an idea of a company. So let's say that you want to start an artistic, your why for starting a theater company is, I want an artistic home for my own personal work, which is great. That makes total sense. But then let's see how these two questions position this idea. In terms of community, how is your personal artistic work in relationship to the community you want to work in? What kinds of works are being produced? What kinds of works are not being produced? Why are they not being produced? And why do you think they should? Do you think there's a community that would care about these works? Why do you think they would care? Have you spoken to that community? Maybe you don't care yet because they haven't experienced it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it really helps you focus why you want to have an artistic home for your own personal work, and how it is in relationship with the community. And the second thing, in terms of the personal and the specific, why does this matter to you on a personal level? There's no need to make this part public information, but find out what the personal drive is. And then consider the specifics of the kind of work that you want to do. I just want to do my own work is just a little broad. You know, a lot of people want to do their own work. You know, everybody wants to make art. Everybody wants to make theater. And so it helps you to be specific about your personal work and why, in the context of all the artists and art being made and so finding out what your work is and what it has to say, and what it has to say that is possibly new. So I'm going to further explain this with an example of another theater company that I kind of like envisioned. I just kind of came up with it last night as I was planning this. Let's say that you're super excited to make work that is on a traveling bicycle or traveling bicycles and focuses on challenging the gender binary. This is just a completely hypothetical idea of a why for a theater company. And so how does this relate to the community? Well, we live in a post-COVID world. People don't feel comfortable coming inside a theater. There's only one other theater company, I think, that has done something similar, but they're not working on pushing the gender binary. So, and also we live at a time when we're slowly realizing that gender is a total social construct. So do you see how like this why for this company is very, clearly connected to the community and the contemporary or the time that we're living in. It speaks to the community and it speaks to the time the community is living in. And then if you look at this personal and the specific, you know, in this situation, in this case, I'm saying that this person feels personally really limited by gender as an individual, beyond the fact that they want to start a theater company. They identify possibly as gender nonconforming, and then they would like to work towards building a gender nonconforming world. That's a personal drive, and it's very specific. And maybe they also feel like sitting inside a theater is totally old school and boring. And so they've decided they're going to take classics, whatever that means, and produce them through this completely brand new lens. So I hope that this is clear enough in terms of what I mean, that, you know, if you're sitting down and you're going to have a little book with you and you're thinking about starting a company, that start with the first page, just writing why, and then just fill out thoughts, ideas, talk about what's happening currently in the scene. And in order for you to talk about what's currently happening, it also requires that you go and check out what's happening, like see shows, go see shows at Fringe, go see shows at Sunworks, check out work that is happening online. There's a lot of work that's happening online right now. Hopefully when we get back to the theater soon, you can go also see them in person. Just experience what the community is doing, especially the community that you actually want to work in. So you can have a better understanding of where your work is in the context of everybody and everything around you.
Just interrupt for 1 second. Just a reminder to everyone that if you have any questions, you can just put them in the chat, either to everyone or directly to me, Caradwin, and I'll record them and Indrit will answer them at the end. Yeah.
I'm going to move a little fast because I realize that I want to give us some time to answer the questions that everybody might have. So if now that you have the why, this is great. Now you can go into the who. Who is going to be involved? And so there's just some thoughts, some proposals that I have for as you start thinking about that. Who are the people that you want to be working with? The first thing is to think about the artists that are the best fit for the projects and the why of the company. And it's important here that you be really intentional and not just, well, these are the people that I know. These are the people that I went to school with. This is really important. I see a lot of companies that are formed with artists who went to theater school together, which is totally cool. There's nothing wrong with that. I have to, make that clear. But maybe now that you've clarified the why and there's clarity around that, now it's the time to understand the people that are involved in it. How do they best fit in the why? So like what I've said here is like, do they hold the same artistic aesthetic and value system that directly correlates to the why? And then the second thing to consider is, ways in which your team is homogenous or diverse, and be intentional again in those choices and ready to explain why you've gathered those artists together, and also to the communities that you're asking to pay money to come see your work. And so hold yourself accountable to who you've gathered to come together and create art. And then the third thing is challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to not stay in your comfort zone and only work with the artists you know or trust on who you think are amazing artists. In fact, challenge your perception of what amazing art is. Because it's important to know that there are many reasons why you might want to work with the same core group of artists, because you have a similar vocabulary, you have trust there. And I think that's important when you're making art. It can be very risky, it can be very vulnerable. But it's also equally important that you find ways to open your circle up so it doesn't become exclusionary. And so these are things that maybe you should consider as you're considering who is going to be part of this company or part of this umbrella that will come together. And so in more practical terms, if we go back to like my brilliant idea of a company that does shows on bicycles and wants to challenge the gender binary, let's see, maybe you should work with more gender nonconforming artists. If you don't know any, get out there and find them. Go see their shows. Ask them if you can grab them a coffee and pick their brain. And then the next thing to consider is, are all your gender nonconforming artists white? Are all your gender nonconforming artists born cis female? And maybe that's important. So again, I'm not saying that it should be one or the other. I'm saying have some clarity around how you're building it. Are all your gender nonconforming artists able-bodied? If you're thinking about bicycles, maybe consider other able-bodied and gender nonconforming artists who do use wheels. And the last thing is challenge yourself and see if what you're doing is limiting possibly. Challenge yourself to consider new ideas around gender that might not necessarily make sense to you right now. And so that's what I mean by challenging is like, I think this is important to find collaborators that you know will come at you and will challenge you, and you can have a discourse or a conversation about it. Because in that, if you set yourself up in that situation, or you position yourself in that way, then you know that you can only build a stronger team, and therefore it will show itself in the art you're making. It will make it clearer for you to articulate to other partners you might want, other funders, donors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to move into the what. And for me, it's about the process. What is your process? And so again, now you've outlined the why, and you've figured out the who, the group of people. So now it's just a matter of finding out what is your process as a company. And as artists, really. And so do you develop with the audience present all the time? Do you need to roll on the floor for about a month for 4 hours every day? Consider the specifics of your rehearsal and development process if you do need them before your production, because you might also decide that you don't want to do development. You want to do plays that already been written, so you don't want to develop new work. Excuse me. So that's fine. So all you need is like rehearsal and then production. So it's just clarifying what that process is. And then be realistic with your timeline, because I see a lot of artists who have an idea today and they want to see it on stage in like 2 months, and in my opinion, theater takes time. Art, in fact, takes time. But I totally understand if you're completely fed up with art that takes a long time, and so you want to maybe work on a process that is quick, without compromising the why or the who, meaning like you're still giving your artists the time, you're still doing the work that you want to be doing, You're still finding money to pay those artists, you know, so think about the ways that you might have to compromise if you want a faster process. And if you figure out a system that is fast and doesn't compromise on all these things, then please give me a call, because I'd love to know what this process is. It's been a challenge of mine, because I do tend to be the kind of person who has like an idea, and I'll wake up like in the middle of the night and I'll just think like, oh, I have this idea, it's brilliant, it's gonna be amazing. And then immediately I start working on it, and you know, I probably won't see that idea on stage for another 5 years or so. Typically the cycles that I've worked in has been about between 3 and 5 years. And so if you want to work in a quicker way, it's possible. Like I said, anything is possible. In my experience, it has been very challenging and difficult. And in fact, I enjoy the longer process a little bit more, because it gives some space for the art. So to understand this a bit more, we're going back to like my example of the bicycle show that wants to challenge gender binary. Maybe you need to work alone first and ride different kinds of bicycles around the city for a while to figure out routes. Maybe you need to figure out the technology, what technology is possible. So you need to work only with the design team first before you bring the other collaborators. And it's important that you understand that it's okay to have things that you are not so sure about, especially when you begin, you know, it's the beginning, it's the first project. You might not be super clear on your process, and that's okay. It's okay not to know every single thing, but it's important to lay out a plan, to have an understanding of how you're going to go about it. And within that, you can kind of go, well, I don't really know quite what's going to come out of this, but this is what we're going to try. In this situation, like you can say, I'm not sure what's going to come out of the technology, but I'm going to work with the designers. You know, we're going to ride bikes around parks, and then we're going to figure out what it is that we might need, right? And then be realistic. Like, don't get caught up in the excitement. Let your art suffer because of that. Give your art the time it needs to cook. And you might not get it right the first time. That's all right, but stay aware of your process and how you can cook it better the next time, or how not to overcook it. Because I've seen both of those options. Like, I've seen shows that are just completely under rehearsed, and then I've seen shows that have been rehearsed to death, and so there's just no more spirit in it. So just, you know, I feel like this is it's a fine balance, and it's one of those things that will require some time, maybe not on project 1, but maybe on project 2 or project 3 as you keep going. But it does help if you start with an understanding of what this process is. It will also help, what I forgot to mention from the point before, it will also help if the clearer you are about your process, the clearer you can be with your team and your potential funders and supporters and audience members who are coming to see the work. So we're gonna move into the how. The how is the last piece, and I really think of it as, the logistics, basically, of starting a theater company. And this is a bit more, I would say it's a bit less high thinking, and it's a bit more like, this is what you can do, this is where you can go, check out this website, talk to these people. And I think it helps a lot if you spend some time before you get to these sort of more practical things on answering these questions for yourself and having that kind of clarity. The how is going to be broken into the logistics of the company, the structure of your entity, the mandate and the values of your entity, your name, the accounting, something you have to think about, the registration of your entity on legal terms, the social media, the online / marketing, we'll talk a little bit about that, And I just want to leave us thinking about partnerships at the very end. Again, what's important to know is that I could spend literally like a whole seminar on just like structure, let's say. So I'm just kind of going to go through them, and I might provide some links at the end where you can read a bit more. And of course, during the question and answer period, you can ask your more specific questions about this. So in terms of structure, we have sole proprietorship. You can build it as a partnership. You can build it as a corporation. You can build it as a not-for-profit and or charity. So sole proprietorship is basically the easiest or the simplest way of a sort of entity. It's a business form that basically means that there's only one person who owns the business and is personally responsible for it and for its debts. So like, for example, right now, as an example, like Lemon Tree Creations is a sole proprietorship. It is owned by Indrit Kasapi. Indrit Kasapi and Lemon Tree Creations are the same thing. And so what that means for you is that when it comes time to do your taxes, then you have to do your taxes for both yourself and the company. And you can do them either under your name or under the company's name. It doesn't really matter because, like I said, and the con to this is that if the company goes under, it's in deficit, that means that you also go under. That means that your assets, any property you might have, any savings you might have, are all part of this equation now. So you're putting all of yourself into it. So something to consider. If there's more than one person, there's 2 or 3 of you that are running this company, and you want to be equal partners on this, then you can set it up as a partnership, which is the same idea as a sole proprietorship, but it basically means that now the responsibility for taxes and everything else is not just on you, but it's split evenly between all the partners on the company. And then a corporation is a separate legal entity. It can enter into contracts and own property in its own name, separately and distinctly from its owners. And so what that means is that you become like, Lemon Tree Creations Limited, let's say. And, the company can then go under, it can be in deficit, but you as an individual don't. So if you set it up as a corporation, that is one way that you can sort of mitigate from divorcing your personal assets in life from the actual company that you're setting up. So these are the things you might want to consider as you're thinking about it. Then when it comes to not-for-profit, most theater companies, especially in Canada, are not-for-profits, but there's definitely for-profit theater companies. They're usually referred to as commercial theaters. Not-for-profit basically just means that any profit the company makes goes back into the company, versus for-profit, it is split between who the owners are. And the owners can be like one person could own the company, one person, or it could be a partnership, or it could also be a corporation. When you set it up as a not-for-profit, that means that now you have to set up a board. And that's the same thing when you have a charity. So a registered charity uses the resources for charitable activities, and this is important, and have charitable purposes that fall into one or more of the following categories. There's very clear categories that the CRA outlines, which is the relief of poverty, the advancement of education, the advancement of religion, and other purposes that benefit the community. So it doesn't say anything about art or theater. So then the question is, how are all these theater companies charities? A lot of them fall under the advancement of education, or some of them might fall under the all other purposes that benefit the community. So it just depends what kind of case you make at the time when you apply to become a charity. It is a long process. It does require that you have a board. And it does require that you have filed papers, you have your accounting in order. So it's a lot of paperwork, not something I would recommend when you're just beginning. But again, it depends on what you're setting up. If what you're setting up is a larger entity, institution that is responding to a need in the community, and so you already have um, members of the community who want to be part of the board, then maybe starting to apply to become a charity might be a good thing. The pros at being a charity means that you can apply to foundations for foundation funding. And you can issue tax receipts to to donors that give large donations. This is something that's quite something that it's been challenging, I think, for me as an independent artist, is that I've been trying very hard to not set up a board within my company. It feels, I've worked for companies, of course, like through Cahoots Theater or Theater Pass Mirai, and I've worked with companies that have boards in place. That structure is the most common one, but I've been really interested in finding other ways of existing as an entity, as an arts organization or company that doesn't necessarily follow those rules. And so right now we are a not-for-profit. We function as a not-for-profit. We are not a registered not-for-profit. And so when we apply for funding, we apply as ad hoc collectives. When it comes time for us to issue tax receipts, it's a longer conversation, and one that we can have maybe a little bit later. Maybe somebody can ask me that question, because I don't want to officially go on the record about this. But there are ways right now that you can still get the donation, but you cannot be the one issuing the tax receipt. So it just means it's a question about your partnerships. So anyway, I'm just going to leave that at that. There's a lot more information that you can get. It's very detailed if you go to canada.ca and literally, or if you just Google sole proprietorship Ontario, you'll get a whole bunch of resources from the Canadian government that explains in detail what the differences are. Something else to mention here is that there is a difference between, that you cannot be both a charity and a not-for-profit, is what's being stated. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true, but this is what has been stated on the website. So something to look into. I'm going to move on to the next thing, which is your mandate and your values. So I hope that you can see now that you've done the high thinking with the why and the who and the what, that you can actually, sorry, one second, my battery is dying. Here we go. Yeah, now that you've had some time to think about, done some high thinking, now when it comes down to actually like writing the stuff down, it probably should be easy, I would assume. And so when you start thinking about a mandate or your values, really think of your mandate as your philosophy or your intentions. Think broad picture in terms of what you want to do. And if you want to be super radical, you check out all the websites, go to Theater Pass Mirai, go to like Convergence Theater, go to Fugen, check out other theaters' websites and see what they've written. I would check out like more specifically like Volcano Theater, like smaller theater companies, or maybe not smaller theater companies, but not necessarily mandate-driven theater companies, but artist-driven theater companies, to see like how they position themselves. What is it that they state? Some of them just write, "This is my philosophy." Some of them write, "These are mandates. These are beliefs." And so just to give you an idea of how you can maybe possibly build it or what you want it to be. So I've seen also theater companies that kind of say like, screw mandates, like it's just something that you say, but you don't really follow. But that can be true, but it's something for you to consider. I think it does provide some clarity in terms of understanding for the community to understand what it is that you're doing. And when you think of your values, it's basically a set of rules that you publicly agree to work by. So your mission is sort of what you want to achieve, and then the values are like the rules. I'm going to achieve that by doing this, 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 and this. I really recommend that with the group of artists, the who's that you've involved in, you gather and you know, make them food and get a nice bottle of wine and spend like the day together. Do like an artistic, high thinking day and sit down and you know, like jot and draw, and maybe your mandate is a drawing and it's not necessarily in words. Like, don't feel limited by the ways in which the mandates and the values have been stated in the past or presently. See if there are other ways that you want to express yourself that still stays true to who you are and what you want to be doing. And the next thing is your name. I mean, I don't have much more to say about this besides pick a name and then one that's hopefully not too complicated. Like for example, when we set up Lemon Tree, we decided that it was all going to be like lowercase and then the T was going to be uppercase. So it's lemon uppercase T and then everything else is lowercase. And very often we get a mistake when people like capitalize the L and capitalize the C. So it becomes like a bit of a nuisance, but we are sticking to it because to us it's very important, and the T like symbolizes the sort of the tree for us. So anyway, one that's hopefully not too complicated and one that people can remember, and also that it means something to you. And I'm going to get back to the name when we go back to the next thing, which is after this, which is the online marketing stuff. And then accounting. This is something that I think most artists or entities that have come together to create a theater company probably forget about, is the sort of the finances. How are you gonna like organize those finances? And so I really say always like start by just really saving every receipt for every production. What I haven't put in here is you need letters of agreement, you need contracts in place. Even with the who's that you've gathered together, write a little something, write a little something that states what it is that you guys are going to do together, because when you put it in wording, in text, it's a different thing than when you just talk about it. And then when it comes to accounting, I really think like if this is not something that you know how to do or you even care to do, I think a lot of artists really don't care. So they hate numbers, they hate accounting. I think get an accountant, like invest in somebody that's going to keep your books clean so that you can get started from the get-go in the right way, as opposed to really have no idea what you're doing for a couple of years and then eventually kind of go like, oh man, I need to find those receipts for this and this and this when you start filing taxes. So Petra Chevrier, who's our financial manager at Theatre Passe-Muraille, is actually doing a seminar on QuickBooks, which is a program that I would have recommended that you use. I use it for Lemon Tree. It's super simple. You can use it on your smartphones. You can use it on, you can go online. It's all online. So Petra's doing a little seminar on QuickBooks. Another resource that you can use is the Artist Producer Resource. These are the websites. Again, I will send these links when we share the actual presentation. So you don't need to like, you know, jot them down right now. But yes, sign up for Petra's seminar on QuickBooks. Download QuickBooks. Give it a try. I think they have a free trial. Look around it. And then go to the Artist Producer Resource and check out what kind of other resources they have already gathered in terms of accounting. Okay, the next thing is
there for a second.
Yes.
Petra's seminar is currently full, but if you're interested, send me an email, and maybe if there are enough of you, we can look about doing a second one or widening her capacity. So if you are interested in her QuickBooks seminar, it is on the same Eventbrite page, so you should be able to see some details. If you're interested, send me a message and I'll let you know.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for letting me know that it's full. This is great. Okay, so when it comes to the registration, you have to, in order to open a bank account, you're going to have to register this entity that you've created with a government. You basically have to let them know that this exists and this is what it is. And now you have all the information laid out. So you can just, it's very simple. It's very easy. You just go to the website that I have right here, or you can just go to, again, to canada.ca and like search registering your business, and the link will come up. It's, I think, about $29, and it's not a very complicated process. It basically tells you what's your name. It goes through your social insurance number, and it tells you what your name is, if there's collaborators, if you want to set it up as a sole proprietorship, and so the process of registering it is super easy. If you want it to become a not-for-profit or a charity, that's a bit of a different process. It does take some time for that. But in order for you to open a bank account and start going, you can start registering it right away. So registering it as a not-for-profit can be a different thing. So you can register it as a sole proprietorship and then register as a not-for-profit, or register it as a partnership or a corporation if you want, and then go through the process of becoming a not-for-profit or a charity. So at least you get started and you have paperwork that states that this exists, and then you can go to the bank and open a bank account under that name, and then now you can get checks written out to that name that you can deposit, and then it becomes also, for accounting purposes, a different bank account that only deals with what you're doing within this company. So we're now at the social media, I'm saying online, I'm saying marketing. I'm kind of like putting this all together. I think our marketing coordinator, Fatuma, did a little behind the scenes like Twitter feed. I would check out, because she had some really, really, really simple sort of guides on what to think about when you're thinking about your marketing, and especially like social media marketing. But as you might understand right now, a lot of the work is digital. So in the past, people would buy ads in magazines and that kind of stuff. But now it's super important that you check that your name, the theater name, is available as a domain or as a handle on all your social media channels. So that's why the name kind of ties into that. I would think about the name and then immediately check if you can purchase that domain really quickly. I think the online presence is really important, but again, you can challenge me on that, and you can say, we're going to build a theater company that's going to have zero online presence. I'm super keen and interested to hear about that as well. And then I would suggest also that you hire or you find someone who works in social media to handle all of your online presence, if that's something that you want to be doing. Invest in how you market and present yourself. I can't stress that enough. I see so many programs, posters, postcards where there's been like zero thought put into it. You know, it's just like, we're going to do the show, and it really says, I really feel like it says a lot about the kind of art that they're going to make. You know, when I see a poster or a postcard that's really just quickly put together and you kind of get a sense, most likely when I go see the show is also quickly put together. You know, it's a sort of, that kind of philosophy travels through all of these different facets. And so think about how you want to present yourself. Think about, you know, now there's so many ways that you can do it for very, very low costs. You know, like there's websites that you can build a logo really quickly. There's websites that have templates for how to build a website, or templates for posters and postcards that are, visually compelling, and more so than just visually compelling, actually speak to the why. Like, speak to why you want to come together and put on this show. It speaks to the people that you're working with. It speaks to the process that you have as artists. So really, I think, really spend some time and invest in that, because it will make a difference in the way that you are perceived or seen, especially at the beginning when you're starting out. And the last thing, we're a little over time, is just something to to think about is partnerships. I really think that you should start at this point thinking about the larger institutions that you want to partner with. And maybe I should say not just the larger institutions, but think about institutions, entities that you want to be partnering with and why. What is it, for example, that Theatre Pass Mirai can do for you besides I just want to produce my play, you know? I really like the venue. I like the philosophy of the company. I like the artistic director. I want the artistic director to be a dramaturge on my piece because, let's say, to be even more specific, in this case, if we're talking about the artistic director at Theatre Pass Mirai, Marjorie Chan, Margie works a lot in interdisciplinary work. So the work I want to be doing is interdisciplinary. This is the right fit. Or, you know, I want to work on a show that is, you know, has a lot of queer content or would really benefit the community at Buddies, you know, the audiences at Buddies. Just start thinking more strategically in terms of who you want to possibly be partnering with, and then start fostering those relationships. And by that, I mean, go to the shows, see their season, sign up for their newsletters, read their value system, start to learn who is working there, who's the associate, who are the producers, who's doing their marketing, and if they have any opportunities for you to meet them in person, like gatherings, like seminars, go to them, because this is how you're going to start putting a face to those artistic leaders, so that later on you can actually like pitch them a show or a possibility for a partnership. Like at Theatre Pass Mirai, we have something called Meet Marjorie, which is an amazing opportunity. Not a lot of theater companies have an opportunity for you to actually be face to face with the artistic director and myself, and actually just tell us about you. And you can tell us about you as an artist, but also you can tell us about the work that you're doing as a company and how you think that your work could partner with Theatre Pass Mirai in the future. So this is a really important element. You can be working in silo. You can work in isolation. If that's something that you want to be doing, absolutely. But I think that we live in an era that making theater is pretty difficult fiscally. So partnerships are a really good way to make your show possible. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is that theater companies right now are in a position where they are looking for these partnerships. You know, artistic directors are looking for these independent theater companies that are making work. And that is also because these entities have access to different sources of funding that have nothing to do with operating funding, which is where the source of funding comes for these other theater companies. So it's sort of pairing up two different sources of funding that could eventually make your work possible. Okay, I think we're at the end. It's 1:10. We have about 20 minutes or 22 minutes or so for some questions. So yeah, one thing I actually wanted to mention, I see the questions here now, wanted to mention is that part of the process will also be that you will probably be writing grants as well. And so our managing director, Regine Cadet, is doing something similar, but it's a bit more personal and intimate. If you sign up to be a part of that, there's a grant coming up, I think, in August. So she will work one-on-one with about 5 or 6, is that right, Caradwin, people on their grants as they're writing them. So it's totally free. And I would say if you want advice from anybody, I think Regine is like the most amazing person, has a lot of experience. Regine used to run the Montréal Arts Interculturelles in Montreal, as also now the managing director of Theatre Pass Mirai, and works with several independent companies, is also an artist herself. So I would highly recommend that you grab one of those spots and have somebody read your grant and kind of work through it with you. Where can they sign up for that, Caradwin?
I just put the link there
Oh, I see it.
in the chat.
Great.
So yeah, there's a Google application, so you can just fill that out. It closes on July 2nd. And then from there will be more steps once she reads over your application to see, I think she's picking about 5 or 6 to actually go in depth to look at the application with you.
Okay, so I have a question here. At what point do you start separate finances, like bank account, HST number for your company? Honestly, I would say start from the very beginning. You know, in terms of the HST number, you don't need an HST number right away. You need an HST number if you make $30,000 or more. Anything under $30,000, and this is when we're talking about income that you have, like profit basically. So if your company got $30,000 to put on a play and spent $30,000 all on putting on the play, the only money that, say it's a sole proprietorship and you have this company and you got $30,000, you paid yourself as a producer on it, maybe like $2,000 or $3,000. I think the only thing that you can claim from that as income is $2,000 to $3,000. The other one is expenses, right? So that's why you have to make sure that you have contracts in place and receipts for every single thing that you did, so that if CRA comes back to you, you can say, yeah, I got $30,000 from Canada Council or Ontario's Council, but here's all the receipts that I spent that money on for the project. I would say if you start a bank account, I would say that would be like the first thing. That's the first thing that you should be doing, is register and then go open a bank account. And then anything that has to do with the bank account, put it through there. Maybe the person who asked this question could just, it's okay if you speak and say, cool, got it. Or like, I have like just a follow-up question, so I make sure that I'm answering it correctly. Okay, I hope I did answer that question correctly. What are the, here's another question. What
they gave a thumbs up. They gave a thumbs up, so you're good.
Oh, yes, yay. Or you can give thumbs up, I like that. What are some strategies to avoid burnout if you're both the primary artistic and administrative force of your company? This is a brilliant question. Well, this I think has to do with the what. It has to do with your process. I think through time, you have to find out. For me personally, it's really about finding out that I couldn't do it all. I thought that I could, but I couldn't do it all. And so it's really being honest with yourself and understanding that if you want to be writing and directing a show, then maybe for that specific project, you need to build in your budget a line for an actual producer to come on board, or an administrator, however you want to think it. So that when you're in rehearsal or in production and you're doing the show, that somebody else is dealing with the administrative part. I think, to me, this is it's the only way forward. It's the only way that I've felt like I can kind of just, focus on directing or writing or being on stage. And also being very clear with your team. Like, we have this thing when we're in rehearsal or in production, we are very clear about when we can talk about administrative stuff. So our team comes together and we say we're gonna talk between Mondays between 9 and 9:30, and then at 10 o'clock I'm in rehearsal, and you cannot talk with me. So it doesn't matter what could be happening. So if you approach me while I'm in rehearsal, if you're one of the administrators or producers that we've hired for that specific project, and you approach me while in rehearsal, I know something's gone really badly for you to like pull me out of rehearsal. But I think strategizing by actually having pockets of time in your rehearsal that this is going to be 30 minutes where I'm going to spend it on sort of keeping up to date with the administrative part. And then I would say just, the other element to this is, again, in the what's your process? Like, don't schedule shows back to back if it's impossible to do, like understand the timeline and understand what is your capacity and don't put yourself in the fire. Here's another question. I hope that answered the question a little bit. The other question is, what are some pitfalls you see other early theater companies fall into early on? For me, the biggest pitfall is lack of clarity. I think a lot of companies kind of come together because they're just sort of like, I don't know, we need a name to put on the Fringe application. And then they're doing their third production, and suddenly they're gone from this collective that was doing a show together. It was about sketch comedy, let's say. I'm just making stuff up. And then by the time they're in the third production, it's like they're just producing because a friend of theirs was like, hey, can you produce my show as well? And they were like, sure. So I see a lot of companies that sort of don't have a clear understanding of what they're going to be doing. And they haven't spent any time actually like doing that kind of like high thinking, And then the second pitfall is companies that are completely clueless to what's happening in the community. Like it's, I meet with artists where I'm just like, oh, you want to do that? But you do know this other company is doing that exact same thing, and has been doing it, let's say, for 10 years. So it makes me think maybe they have not spent as much time, checking out the community, seeing what's out there, what kind of work is being produced, what kind of work is, like I was saying, what kind of work is not being produced. So I do see a lot of companies that have a very little understanding of the kind of work that's already happening, and also what kind of work should be happening, look at the shows that are being programmed and understand where the work that you want to be doing sits in the context of that, right? Like, and so you can actually have a better case or be able to articulate a case for your company. Hillary's got a question. She says, I am curious about structural considerations when a theater company is one enterprise within a cluster of enterprises. So it seems to me like it's an organization within an organization, kind of like a festival within. Yeah, I guess probably the same. I see what you mean when you say like land-based enterprises, one of which is for theater. I'm curious if then it's worth considering ways in which this theater organization exists and what it can provide to this larger enterprise. If it has to be its own legal entity, then I would, and if it's possible for it to be so, can it have a different board? Those are the things I think to consider, because if you cannot have a different board, we have to function within the board of the larger institution, then it would be probably set up as a partnership of sorts. I'm also assuming that it can maybe be like the not-for-profit or charity sort of offshoot of an enterprise, right? Like there could be an enterprise and then one part of it is actually charitable. So I guess I would consider that. I'm not sure if I'm answering correctly, because I think, yeah, and that's great. I think if if you can set up a different board, then that's great. Then it lives. Then it doesn't really have anything to do with the other enterprise, as long as it's, as long as it's still got the same values as a larger enterprise, and sort of like they collaborate with each other. But legally, they're probably completely two different things, and so you can set up two different boards and set it up as a charity or as a not-for-profit, depending on what you want to be doing. Yeah. I think you had another question here. Yeah, I'm going to take this other question. In terms of the grant writing tips, whoever wrote that, there is, I'm not sure if this is online, but if you go to our YouTube at Theater Pass Marai, Marjorie and I did a grant writing seminar. It's specific to the theater recommenders grants, but you know, we talk about writing, basically grant writing tips. And so it's a YouTube clip on the YouTube channel for Theater Pass Mirai.
I can send that link as well. Like all the links that we've mentioned, I'm going to email everyone in the same thread that I had emailed you the Zoom link, and I'll attach that link as well.
Caradwin is amazing, obviously, so she will get that, but that will give you some idea of some grant writing tips. And I would say like sign up for that, you know, workshop with Regine if you can grab a spot. The other question is here is, if you have a board of directors, should they be working board or governing board? That's a really good question. I would say it depends on your financial capacity. If you are starting out and there's not a lot of money available, then I think, and you want to have a board, then I would say you probably want a working board. In fact, like the pros of having a board really are that the community comes together and you gather their expertise, right? I find it hard, like for me, I find it hard to think about having a working board when the company was set up from artistic reasons, like my personal artistic reasons. What we set up was what we called more of an advisory board. And it wasn't necessarily a working board, but it was a board that we could go to and ask for advice, like how can we raise more money, you know? So you want to be able to ask people who join that board that have that kind of expertise and skill. So yeah, to answer your question, I would say if you're just starting out and there's not a lot of finances available, I think you want to gather a board that can bring lots of different skills. Like if somebody is really good with organizing and spreadsheets, and you know, then that person can maybe take care of like some of that admin stuff. Maybe you have somebody who's an accountant on your board, and then you don't have to pay for an accountant. You have somebody who can sort of guide how the accounting works. So there are like a lot of pros to that. A governing board, I think, is something to consider for maybe later down the road when there's some operating already in place, or when there's already a history of project funding. And so your board is there to make sure that everything's going in order, but not necessarily working. Alyssa has a question. I'd love to hear about your experience performing the opera in a shed. I'm curious about using spaces not typically used for theater and how that changes things. Listen, like, if you want to start an opera company that is not the COC or, you know, like Tapestry, I think that you're in the right, like there's not a lot of opera companies, but if you want to do work in spaces that are not typically used for theater, that's also something. And so something for you to consider there is, do you want it to be site specific, or do you want to make a theater inside different spaces, right? Because, you know, what I would say is, do I want to say that? I'm just thinking, I guess consider the ways in which spending so much money to make a theater inside a space that is not a theater versus just renting flat out a theater, what that actually like does for you. Like if that's necessary, I would say like go for it. I'm having a hard time right now finding like an example of something where I'm like, yeah, in that situation, like do that. But maybe there's a reason for it. But I would say like, if you're thinking of spaces outside of a theater, like really start thinking about something that's site specific. And what that means is using the site for what it is versus trying to turn it into a theater, you know? So our experience of turning the shed into a theater it worked really well because I guess the opera audience didn't have any of those experiences. I mean, if you're somebody who loves opera, you're going to the COC or you're going to Tapestry. I think there's a few other independent opera companies. So, you know, we really stood out. You know, they were like, we're going to do a show in a shed. They were like, what is this opera that's going to be in a shed with a whole orchestra? We had like a I think, a 15-piece orchestra inside. So what we did is we transformed the shed into a theater. So, which is the thing that I'm saying might not be the most exciting thing to do or something that I would highly recommend, but it did work for that community really well because it just provided a different alternative, you know. We have like 3 more minutes left. If there's other questions, feel free to write them in here.
I'm not sure if you saw if it was already answered in the chat
Yes.
about how long should the process, sorry, how far along in the process should we be before we decide to incorporate with the government? Is it really necessary in the first 2 to 3 years?
I think you're using the word, so Chris, you're using the word incorporate with the government, and I just want to clarify that you mean like registering with the government versus incorporating, because if you're going to incorporate, you don't need to do that right away. If you want to incorporate down the road, you can do that. You can become a corporation later on. But if you want to register with the government, I mean, it depends. I guess it depends if you want to have a different bank account, really. Like if you want to have a different bank account, then I would say you have to register right away so that you can open a bank account. But I've heard also of rumors of friends of mine who like just showed up at the bank and were like, we just want to open a bank account under this name, and they did it and they didn't require any documents. So there have been examples of that. From my experience, they required a business registration number or some sort of letter that stated that we existed as an entity. If you want to incorporate as a corporation, which is a legal entity that's completely different than who the artists are that are involved, then I would say, yeah, you could take some time with that. You don't have to do it right away. Maybe in the first 2 years, you can kind of really start to figure out how you're going to work together, what kind of shape it's going to take. So it's not necessarily like the first thing that you want to be doing. But I would recommend it if you're worried about your personal assets, you know? Cool. Any last questions? What I was going to say also is that you will get an email from Caradwin and myself, and you will have both Caradwin and my email. If there's at any point any other question you might have, I'm free to answer those questions. So just shoot me an email. Again, like I said, it's just from my experience. And I wanted to close by saying, going back to sort of my bio and just saying how like I really sort of identify as anti-establishment, and I've really been kind of trying to, as I speak to artists who are coming together and creating new entities and new companies, I wanted to let you know that when I first started, I was having a meeting with Brendan Healy, who's now running Canadian Stage, but at the time he was running Buddies in Bad Times. We were talking about a project that we were going to do together, the two companies. And Brendan really encouraged us to think a little outside the box and to think about ways in which we could exist that were not the same way that all of the other theater companies were. And so I wanted to pass that on, like think about ways in which theater is made, and think about ways in which it doesn't serve the art maybe, and how you can maybe build or creatively think of a completely different way, you know, like post-COVID, we're thinking of the world is completely changed, you know? And so how can you build a theater company or an entity or an organization that doesn't necessarily follow the rules in which things have been already, made or existed in the past? Because I think that we need more artists to challenge the ways in which we make the art, so we can hopefully create better processes and better rehearsal periods and funding cycles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.